afternoon. My name is Lindsey Baker. I'm the CEO for Maryland Humanities. We are really excited for our first ever Bringing the Humanities to Life webinar. With me today, I actually have 3 Maryland Humanities board members, which may not be the makeup of every one of these Bringing the Humanities to Life webinars, but it made sense for advocacy. So I'm going to introduce each of them, and I'm going to let them talk a little bit about who they are and their background right as we get started. So let's start with our board chair, Chanel Johnson.
Thank you, Lindsay. Well, my name is Chanel Johnson. I am an artist and a visual artist, as well as the executive director of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. Our agency operates the State's Museum on Black History, which is the Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum, right in downtown Annapolis. We also co-administer the African American Heritage Preservation Program grant in partnership with Maryland Historical Trust. That is a $5 million annual grant awarded to African American heritage sites throughout the great state of Maryland. So African American cemeteries, historic churches, schoolhouses, small museums, and so much more. Maryland being one of the founding colonies has a deep history of the anti-slavery movement, Black cultural arts renaissance, as well as the civil rights movement and beyond. So I love my work.
Thank you, Chanel. That's great. I am going to jump to Chris Schenk.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lindsay, it's a pleasure to be with you and my fellow board members and panelists and all of the guests today. It's quite an honor to talk about this subject. I've been percolating about these ideas for a while now, so it's good to have a venue to express them. Again, my name is Chris Schenk. I'm going to do this in reverse order. I think most importantly to this discussion, I'm a graduate of Johns Hopkins University with a BA in American History in 1994, which I really think has shaped my thinking in more ways than I can possibly express. Most of my career was spent in and around Maryland state government. For the past really 32 years, I've held a variety of appointed and elected offices. I was in the Maryland House of Delegates representing Washington County, Maryland, a very historic county in the state from 1998 to 2010. I was elected into the Maryland State Senate from 2010 and 2014. And in 2014, I joined the administration of Governor Larry Hogan, where I was proud to serve in a variety of different capacities, running an agency, to being a senior advisor, to being his chief lobbyist in Annapolis, working on behalf of his legislative package. So it's good to be with everybody today, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Chris. Soo Koo.
Thank you, Lindsay. I think this group really tells us how important a relationship and friendship is. I've known Lindsay and Chanel for many, many years, and Chris, actually, we served together under the leadership of Governor Larry Hogan. So we are brought together here under the name of Maryland Humanities. So I'm really honored to be with you. For many years, I've been working on public engagement in nonprofit, state government, and federal, sort of at the intersection of domestic and international affairs and context. So I would like to describe myself as a people government connector, and connecting communities and policy, and translator, telling people how global challenges and opportunities impact local lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your intros and for being willing to take part in this first experiment with me. I appreciate your partnership on the board in general, and especially around advocacy efforts. So with that said, I'm just going to frame out a little bit about what we're going to talk about today and what the day will look like. And by day, I mean next hour of your life. We're going to start with a moderated kind of panel questions that I'm going to toss to our panelists. And then at the end, I will be pulling questions from the Q&A, I think would be best if people are able to use that. I might try to keep an eye on the chat as well. With that being said, I really just want to introduce the big picture idea behind bringing the humanities to life. And the idea is that we are, in 2026, seeing that the humanities are there are questions about the role of the humanities. And whenever I'm talking to leaders in the nonprofit field, we're talking about lost funding, we're talking about the challenges in interpretation and things like that. When I'm talking to leaders who are working in colleges and universities, there's a lot of questions about what the humanities can do for students after they graduate. There's a lot of questions about how to encourage students to actually get degrees in the humanities. And so with that in mind, we launched this webinar series to really show you what the humanities can do for you as a person, no matter what sector you are in. Your foundational learning in the humanities, how does it impact your ability to work in tech, in hospitality, and in this case, in advocacy? So today, we're not necessarily going to be talking about how can we advocate for the humanities. That being said, I'm in the middle of doing that nonstop at the state and the federal level right now. So I could see that eking into the conversation, but the main focus of our conversation is really going to be about how does our foundation in the humanities enable us to be better advocates? And so that means if you are working in, immigrant rights, but you have a degree in history or English literature, how do those degrees and that background help you advocate for immigrant rights? So laying that kind of foundational basis, I recognize we might get a little kind of into the how do we advocate for the humanities as well, but that's going to be our goal, is to show you what do the humanities bring to the table when you're doing advocacy work. So that being said, I'm going to start with our first question, and Sue, heads up, we're going to start with you, okay? In your view, how do the humanities function as a foundation for civic engagement and advocacy, not just as inspiration, but as a way people think, speak, and make decisions in public life?
Yeah, thank you. So I want to start it with the I majored in political science, but I actually primarily focused on taking philosophy classes, art philosophy, and the literature when I was in college, anthropology as well, even when I was in Georgetown for my master's degree. So I highly recommend that students that our next generation, they should definitely take those classes and learn how to apply them into real life. But anyhow, um, so my number one thought is that humanities aren't cultural decoration. They are the operating system of a civic life, education, academic opportunities, and small businesses, and more. As I said earlier, I myself, I would describe myself as a government people connector, like a global local messenger, translating what governments do into what it means for real human lives. At its core, everything we do in public service is for people. Government is not the purpose, we're subject, people are. So humanities keep us anchored to that truth. They teach how power works, how narratives shape understanding, and how to deliberate without dehumanizing. So connecting it to my job is to translate complex decisions into everyday language so everyday Americans can participate meaningfully. That's how you democratize the democratic process. But humanities don't tell people what to think politically. They teach people how to participate in democracy. So I really believe that humanities are the training ground for democratic participation. Without that human-centered foundation, I mean, you get bureaucracy, but with it, you can get a democracy that actually serves human life in a humane way. And then in the era of AI, I think that human judgment, the creativity, human-centered approach is more important than ever. Thanks.
Thank you, Sue. Chris?
Well, that's hard to beat from Sue's perspective, and I am in nearly perfect alignment with everything that Sue just said. So I don't want to be too redundant about it. I'll equate it to like a computer operating system, the role that the humanities plays. You have a Microsoft platform, it makes everything work. You have certain programs and such, but for me and the academic training that I received, to me, it's all about thinking and teaching you how to process information, how to decide what is relevant, how to decide what's not relevant, to use words to shape arguments about history, was how I learned to do that, but that I've applied that to nearly any kind of a policy framework that I've been involved in, whether it be political policy, is it teaches you how to think. And that is, I had to defend a thesis, I had to defend my research, and was taught in a very rigorous manner by my professors throughout my undergraduate and then graduate degrees. I think, and Sue made this point, maybe I'll just elaborate a little bit more. As much as I value my ChatGTP subscription and the role that it plays, I think it's more important than ever in terms of lest we not succumb to intellectual laziness and have either politicians or bureaucrats tell us how to think, but to also not have generative AI substitute free inquiry, which I think is one of the more existential risks for AI. I think there's lots of existential risk. One that actually I think is more relevant than some of the ones that I hope, world-ending AI isn't something we have to worry about. Who knows? Maybe it will. But I worry about us sort of succumbing to the lure of not having to evaluate evidence and just doing what we're told, because I think that reinforces some of the political trends that we're seeing right now in our society, and it's one that I think the humanities, and particularly in any of these subjects, whether it be philosophy or literature or history, buffers us against that.
Love that, Chris. Thank you. Chanel. Oh, you're on mute, hon.
Thank you. So definitely, and obviously I'm preaching to the choir that the humanities and all of its forms, the arts, anthropology, the teaching of history, um, all of those things are critical, right? In how we preserve, but really expanding democracy in a more free and equitable society. So how I approach humanities, and again, preaching to the choir, is that this work that we're doing to honor the stories of a diverse world that we live in is really a part of dismantling a not too long ago history of eugenics, a history of Jim Crow, a history of enslavement, and really like a sanctioned way of thinking within the human sciences, within academia, be it Yale or Harvard, of considering and justifying the flattening, the oppression of those that were non-white, non-Protestant, which is a lot of people. So I think that this work, I know, again, not even I think, this work is critical to a more liberated, free, equitable world. So it's dire.
Thank you, Chanel. I'm laughing because, yeah, everybody's got such different perspectives, but it makes me so glad we're doing this webinar. This is exactly what I was hoping for. So thank you all. Just so panelists know and members who are joining us, I'm going to put the questions in the chat because I know from listening to these things, sometimes by the time we get to the third person, I forget what the question is. So now we're all on the same page moving forward. Chris, the next question is for you. Okay.
Ready?
Can you share a concrete example from your own work or from Maryland where a humanities informed approach changed how people understood an issue or influenced a real world decision?
Great. I would love to. I want to riff a little bit as I get to that on what Chanel just said about storytelling, because I think at its core, from an advocacy perspective, politicians put their pants on every day like everybody else and are human beings and respond to the same types of arguments as what everybody else does. In fact, I dare say, have being what I'll call a recovering politician, sometimes it's even less rigorous than what you might think. I call it high school extended, but I'll save that for another podcast. But I think the storytelling is absolutely critical. And I think the best type of advocacy is coupling a good story, telling a story. And a story I don't necessarily mean as fiction. It's a point of view, it's a perspective of a human being. Again, we're talking about the humanities. That's how you tell the singular human story. But it's also evidence-based, and demonstrating that you can look at one individual story and extrapolate into a lot of different stories and hopefully make informed policy. So I had to think about this one a little bit, and a quick anecdote. We were debating in the state Senate a piece of legislation. It's a little dated now because we've gone full cannabis legalization in Maryland, but the interim step on that was to, instead of a criminal penalty for a de minimis amount of marijuana, a civil citation. And I am a conservative, served in a pretty conservative area, and I was skeptical of doing this. And My very good friend, Senator Bobby Zirkin, who was advocating the piece of legislation, basically challenged me, and he said that he had done some research and felt that ultimately states that had taken this interim step really saw no larger path to youth utilizing marijuana than other states that had not. But all of the collateral consequences made it worthwhile to do this. And he challenged me to have an open mind about it and to do my own research. And that's exactly what I did. And the humanities framework that Professor Louis Galambos at Johns Hopkins taught me in defending my senior thesis, which was to look at the evidence, see where the evidence takes you, and even if the evidence takes you in a direction that you weren't prepared to go, and maybe even sort of threatens your sort of worldview and your point of view, you have to be open to that evidence in order to say, I'm going to be guided by that. I'm going to be guided by the truth as opposed to other factors. And so ultimately, I had to concede, and I got up on the Senate floor and I said, I had my doubts about this, but I did the research on my own, and I ended up voting for it. And I'm proud that I did vote for it. So I think that platform, I think everybody should utilize in some way. It's not. I think if you come from a more STEM or science-based, scientific method approach, then I think that works out fine too. I guess I would just sort of veer towards the humanities because the humanities at its core is about human beings and their flourishing. So that would be my example, Lindsay.
Thanks, Chris. I like that examples too. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Storytelling, obviously, actually, like I've seen so many different job openings, even from the private sector, like looking for a good storyteller. So this is like a strategic approach, not just, oh, this is something good to have. So one example I want to share is back to the COVID-19 era. There was a surge in anti-Asian hate. That was also personal experience for me as well. And then back then I worked for uh, Governor Hogan and then his spouse, First Lady Hogan, who was a first generation immigrant from South Korea, raised three kids on her own. So very diverse family actually. And she really well represented the diversity the state of Maryland has and then what direction we need to go. But her story, telling her story was so powerful, just genuine, personal story. This is who I am. I'm a mom, a grandmother, and the message was so simple. We should love each other. Hate has no home. Think of your kids, think of your neighbors and families. And then I think that was very touching message, but also from the staff point of view, like as a comms person, as her chief of staff, like that was really strategic approach to address the challenge we faced together, actually. Really, that was a humanities like language reshaping how people understood the crisis and that hate crimes. And also we spoke to people as parents and grandparents, not as statistics. So through storytelling and partnership building, we translated fear into solidarity. Authority alone could not solve the moment. Trust actually did. And then I think that, oh, I'm sorry, in the moments of a crisis, technical solutions are not enough. What stabilizes the situation was our was our shared human narrative. So civic engagement really begins with understanding, which we primarily learn from humanities.
Ooh, I'm gonna write that one down. I've been writing down little clips that you all are saying. Chanel, you're next.
I was just thinking that. I was like, ooh, that's a bar. Um, civic engagement. Wait, say that again, Sue?
Civic engagement begins with understanding, which we primarily learn from humanities. And
Yeah,
also, it's a humanities spirit. So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Is it to me?
It is Stephen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of easy for my job because my job is all about preserving stories and it is like such a humanities-centered position. I would say that when it comes to advocacy and fundraising, um, like, okay, so advocating for the museum and resources for the museum, be it for exhibitions, educational programs, the folks that we are connecting with, right? The content that we're trying to share and make accessible, there's so many human to human entry points um, with the work of our agency, right? So, for example, in learning about Frederick Douglass, and his autobiographies, and if you're and you'll see this in many narratives from those that were once enslaved, which is, the tearing apart of families, right? And you can come from any culture and that could resonate with you like, oh my God, like that really happened, till to now, like when you see families being torn apart in 2026. So that level of this has happened before. And not only has this happened before, but this is how this person resisted and use their voice to improve the world around them for the next generation. So you too can do this. You too can be an agent of change. So that could be very empowering to the folks that we're, engaged with in advocacy or fundraising or our visitors or community partners. It's really great work. And then I also think about our governor, Governor Wes Moore, who is the first African American governor for the state of Maryland. You know, I believe folks really started paying attention to Governor Moore prior to him getting into office because he wrote his own book, his own autobiography that people connected with, right? So I think that telling your story from an authentic place um, is such a great way to um, convey a message, right? Be it not to sound superficial, but really selling a product, selling an idea, sharing an idea. Um, and it's such a great way to build community, right, around a cause. So I'll stop there.
No, I wrote down a couple things you said as well, and one thing that really resonates with me as Chanel and I go way back because we're both museum nerds, and that's where I come from. If people don't know that about me yet, thinking about how when you're creating an exhibit and you're doing work in public history, how the stories that you stand up and tell can be inspirational to the people who are coming to visit or coming to the program or the exhibit. And those stories of resistance, which is a form of advocacy, I would argue, right? Like there are so many different facets that go into advocacy. So using that kind of public history to inspire people to be advocates, I think is really important. And I'll just plug that one of Governor Moore's previous books was a One Maryland, One Book top 10 pick. It might have made top three. This preceded my time at Maryland Humanities and his time as governor, but yeah, you're right about that. Telling that story was important.
And
Chanel,
he wrote two books.
he did, yes. It was his
One,
first book, I think, that made it.
yeah. Yeah. Did I do those balloons?
I guess you're excited about
Okay, all right. But his second book was on the Freddie Gray uprising, which
that. Yeah.
was really good. Yeah.
I think it was the other Westmore that was the One Man One Book, but don't quote me on it because I wasn't here yet. So I won't take responsibility for knowing the full catalog of the top 10. That being said, Chanel, we're going to start with you for the next one. And the question is, for people listening who may not see themselves as advocates, what is one practical humanities skill they could start using tomorrow to be more effective in their work or community?
I think, well, sometimes the connotation like behind, well, when we think of advocate, underneath that, people might assume that, oh, you have to be extroverted or you have to use your voice and be at the podium and, and all of that. But to be a strong advocate, right, is to be informed. So learning the history of your community where you live, like to have like a really grounded understanding of place. So even if you think of downtown Annapolis at one time had a large Black population. But because of the history of urban renewal, a lot of homeowners were displaced. The building that our museum actually stand is in now is a National Historic Site, but the county at one point wanted to tear it down during urban renewal in downtown Annapolis to turn it into a parking lot. And so and the county executive, he did this a racial equity study to really give context behind, just the historical disenfranchisement of Black citizens in Annapolis, right? So having that like understanding and not kind of using this really with an impulse to flatten community experience as to, oh, their culture is bad, or or whatnot, or they're just bad because they're Black. You know what I mean? Taking a research approach and understanding why things are the way things are, starting in your own neighborhood, is important work. Can be an important work for an advocate.
Thank you, Chanel. And what I'm hearing from that is historical research, start where you are, understand your community, and I'll give the plug, both as someone who's a graduate of running a tiny historical society and an organization that funds tiny historical societies and museums. You don't have to figure it out on your own. Go to your local historical society, whether it's city or county.
Yeah. And then also, there are Black historical societies. There's the Maryland State Archives. There's a lot to pull from, right? So I would say, you know, um, yeah, it's important.
I would like to just call out one other piece of what you said, which to me is holding nuance and understanding that history is complex. I think everybody on this call knows. Well, let me not make assumptions. I'll speak for myself. I have 2 degrees in history, right? Too many degrees is what I like to say. However, I still learn things about history in my community, in my state, in my country, in this world every single day. So holding nuance to understand that history is not clean, history is continually changing in terms of how we understand it, and that applies not just to national things and international things. It applies to your community, and those groups that we mentioned, that Chanel mentioned by name and I mentioned kind of broadly in concept, they're continually doing that research and able to show you what they've uncovered and what they've learned about the community that you want to do research in. So now I'm talking too much. Chris, I'm going to go to you.
Great. Maybe what I can offer in this one is a little overgeneralization of I think what you and Chanel just very eloquently identified from pop culture. Big fan of Ted Lasso, and one of my favorite scenes in the second season of Ted Lasso is the dart game, where Ted actually wins a game, notwithstanding the fact that his opponent didn't think that he would be able to play British darts. There you go. Very good. Very good. And the famous line in the moment of high drama is Ted says, and I want to address this in just a second, be curious, not judgmental. And he attributes it, and I think this is very important for this podcast, he attributed it to Walt Whitman. From a historical perspective, there is absolutely no evidence that Walt Whitman ever said that. But it sounds like something Walt Whitman would say. I just need to correct the record. I was about to buy the T-shirt, and then I looked and like, no, Walt Whitman didn't actually say that. But it sounds really good. But I think that's what is so important in my life is look, we all have a tendency to want to lean on narratives from a point of view, a worldview, a political point of view, and say, oh, that's what I believe. But I think the curiosity to examine those beliefs and whether you're right, left, in the middle someplace, but to just be curious and assemble the evidence yourself, I think is very key.
Ooh, Lasso reference. I'm just gonna be quiet. Sue, you go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we've been talking about democracy and humanities, which I'm so passionate about. So, one thing I want to add is like a building democracy or participating in democratic process requires skills, not just opinions. So skill question is very important, I think, Lindsay. I think we should be a good listener and translator. So let me tell you a little bit more about what I mean about being translator. My communications work engage both American communities and here at the State Department of Foreign Audiences abroad as well. For example, I explain American policy priorities while listening carefully to how people interpret them, and I adapt language to what resonates culturally. So the same principle applies domestically. Accessible language is an equity issue. Elite language excludes people from decision making. So I really love that job. And I think that this approach is what guarantees governance success, not authority alone. Again, democracy succeeds when people succeed. Everything we do is for people and their lives again. So to do that job, like language work is very important. Listening to them. I mean, listening is a lot of times I think that it's more powerful than telling. I mean, we've been talking about storytelling as well. If you want to do storytelling, you need to listen first. Otherwise, you don't know what they need, you don't know how they live, and then what challenges they face. So, yeah, this is something I really want to highlight. And then Chanel pointed out that, oh, do you need to be like an introvert or extrovert, like in advocacy world? And I don't think a personality matters. Anybody can be a good advocate. Anybody can be a good leader through training. I totally believe that. So putting that aside, yeah, being a good listener, that's really important. Being a good translator with the right language, I think that's very important. But I think all of us are sort of on the same page. What we've been discussing is like well aligned in terms of like what's really important in action. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. I've lost the order of who needs to go first now. Sorry, y'all, but here we are. I want to talk a little bit more about skills, which I think is really kind of what we're talking about when we talk about applying the humanities to other sectors. So, with that in mind, I have a kind of tangential question that I think I'm going to Chris first. Does that sound right? Okay.
Hit me.
Okay, cool. So, if the humanities build democratic skills, which skill feels most urgent right now and why?
So, for a variety of reasons, I've been reading and leaning a lot into George Orwell lately. I think he is a man for our times in so many different respects. I've been delaying doing it, but everybody's read 1984, Animal Farm, all the classics. I thought, all right, it's time to pick up his volume of essays. So I did. Actually, you can't see that, but it's very large. He was a very prolific writer. And from a democratic skill perspective, I think channeling my inner Orwell, I think the moment right now calls for moral and intellectual independence. And I think, one of the things that Orwell said in 1939 He, interestingly enough, did not define the concept of groupthink. I kind of thought he did, but he did not. Groupthink was not his, but he said, we are descending into an age in which two and two will make five when the leader says so.
Mm.
And I want to be very clear when I'm saying that because I think that that's the moment that we're in. And I don't want to necessarily suggest that that is just on one side of the aisle. I think it's on both sides of the aisle. From a political standpoint, I think people are so readily tribalized into a core constituency, it negatively impacts their ability to think for themselves. And I think that that's really the story of Orwell's life. The right claims Orwell, the left claims Orwell. Orwell was persecuted by the left and the right. And I think Orwell felt that it was very important to draw his own conclusions and not just subscribe to a political narrative because it was convenient for espousing his particular point of view. And so the reason that I'm an independent today politically is because I think we've had a little too much of that in our democracy. And I feel very strongly that we all need to take a step back from those identities that are so inherent to our very being and so threaten us when our worldview is challenged that it prevents us from having empathy and being curious and evaluating evidence ourselves. So I when I think those political skills and those democratic skills that are lacking right now, that I think the humanities can help us lead us back, I think that's moral and intellectual independence.
Thank you, Chris. I'm trying to hold back all of my thoughts because you're sparking so much for me right now. Again, I don't know who's supposed to go next, but Chanel or Sue, if either of you want to start.
Um, yeah, I can go. Totally agree with Chris. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. That resonates with me very much, actually. What I want to add is specific skill. It's more like a soft skill, actually. So the ability to disagree with the dehumanizing probably is really important when, especially we face, authoritarian rule or like political polarization, things like that. And this is especially important in our country. Our identity is built from immigrants from European countries to Asia. We have so much cultural diversity, intellectual diversity. The country exists because people from different backgrounds learned how to live together. And sort of in alignment with the Chris pointed out, humanities cultivate empathy, humility, and a learning attitude that prevents alienation. Without that, I think uh, we risk losing what makes this country proud and functional. And then quickly going back to one point that I made earlier, technology, AI accelerates the speed, efficiency, productivity, which we definitely need every day to work smarter, study smarter, and we need that for the best use of our time and limited resources and the best prioritization of different tasks we face every day. But I think humanities really slow us down a little bit enough to keep decisions human-centered and compatible with our diverse social fabric. So yeah, dehumanizing.
Thank you, Sue. Chanel, you have anything on that?
Yeah, Chris and Sue, thank you for these great insights. And you guys need to be in elected office right now. So I mean, what I take from the humanities and my role as executive director is just being, and I'm going to piggyback off of Chris and Sue, being consistently curious, and not thinking my way is the right way, because I'm wrong a lot, and I embrace that. And my team, they're brilliant, and when we get in the paint, so to speak, figuratively, and literally. There's a mix of diverse ideas and conflicting ideas. And so that My leadership style is really about collective planning, because I've found that, um, when priorities are given from the top down, it doesn't have as much, the work doesn't have as much impact because the people that are doing the work, which is the staff and the team, they have more connections with the greater community. Not to say that the board and, other stakeholders can't um, advise, but it's really the staff, the team that's like boots to the ground that should be lifting up critical priorities that they see, right? So I'm really about, I hope I'm answering your question, but I'm collective planning, listening, historical research, field research, all the researches, data collection to make these like informed strategic decisions. So I'm gonna try to pare that down a bit. So, um, you know, data from like how many visitors do we have in a month? Who are our visitors? Where are they from? You know what I mean? Surveys and conversations with our visitors, like what would they like to see? How does this connect with them and their their story and whatnot? All of that informs um, how we interpret and present our content. So that was kind of like a salad bowl of ideas, but thank you for the question.
Thanks, Chanel. I mean, to take your like salad bowl out, right, and put it on a veggie tray or something, what I'm hearing is when we talk about the humanities skills, collective planning, which is, empathy and understanding different points of view, listening, historical research, data, which, I think we could probably have a whole webinar on the humanities and data collection. Those are all pieces that translate into your advocacy work. Not just your leadership, not just how you plan exhibits and how you plan programs, but how you communicate with your elected officials about funding, about bills, about the needs of your organization. So that's what I got out of it. And I love that kind of understanding of what are the skills that you get from the humanities that you apply to advocacy. So Chanel, you're up next, but I have a question from the audience that we're going to go with. We're in our audience question portion of the day. Um, so the question is, and it's going to go to everyone, but we're going to start with Chanel. Thank you. Thank you all. I know this panel is not about advocating for the humanities. That's okay. We said we were probably going to get there, so we're going there now. But I am wondering, how do you balance telling diverse, complete, and critical histories while potentially facing restrictions by the current administration? Does the continued survival of your position, organization, nonprofit ever seem in opposition to speaking out about censorship and defunding?
Yeah, that's such an excellent question. And a lot of organizations and groups are really chewing the bit on all of that. For us as an agency, even before when okay, I will say when I started in 2017, I made a commitment that was in alignment with the board that we were going to keep the mission first, right? That is our North Star, and we're not going to allow political pressure, even financial pressure, to smudge, downplay, or erase our mission, right? And and in light of this current federal administration, we had an IMLS grant taken away because we didn't fit the model of what history should, how it should be interpreted. But the state's attorney's office helped us with an affidavit, along with a number of other organizations that had their federal funding taken away based off of their falling under this DEI umbrella. And we won, right? We got the funding back. We're continuing with the research project, which is a multi-year project to research the remains of African individuals, some family groups that were found in construction sites and land erosion throughout the state of Maryland. And we're working with historians to research who these individuals were, what their lives were like potentially during the time that they were alive, and locating their descendant communities to lay them to rest. So I think that if, and I want when I say from my experience, what has been our agency's superpower is our commitment to our mission. And be it, short-term gain, long-term gain, anytime you compromise that, it has lasting effect. And it could have generational effect and negative implications from losing trust from the greater community to morale issues with staff and board members. And so all sorts of dysfunctions. So that's what we hold on to.
Thank you, Chanel. Chris, do you have anything to add to this audience question?
Yeah, I do. I appreciate Chanel and her story and how she's navigated some of these tricky currents that are out there. From my own perspective, being outside of government now, but obviously on the board of the Maryland Humanities, another cornerstone scholar that I think is so relevant, and something that he said about this. George Will, who is perhaps one of the most classically trained in the liberal arts and humanities. One of the things that really stuck with me was George Will admitting in a column in the Washington Post that it was his eighth decade in life and questioning why it took him 8 decades to hear about the Tulsa race riots. And I think that indicates that we've fallen short in teaching the humanities and telling all of our stories. And I want to be very quick to say that I am very, very proud of our nation and our ideals. And but I also recognize that some of our founding fathers fell short in that. And it doesn't, in my mind, threaten, because again, I think you can have a nuanced worldview and accept that people are, and this is my religious values as well. I think human beings are fallen and that we make mistakes and that we need to hold ourselves accountable for those mistakes. That's what justice is, in my opinion. So it doesn't threaten my worldview to have that accountability and to say some really, really bad things happened. It doesn't detract, and I think Martin Luther King said very eloquently, I think I'm paraphrasing, but I might actually get it, the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. I firmly believe that. And I think that at the same token, I think it really sells our nation and our strength short when we somehow think that not telling those stories of where we have fallen short is a detriment and threatens us. It doesn't threaten me in the least. And I think that is very important. Now, I will say on the other side, I do feel threatened when we are going to say, well, we're not going to celebrate our democratic values because I think, I'm very proud of the United States. I'm very proud of the Constitution. It's a experiment that we are constantly in need of refining, and to suggest that somehow that's not suited to our modern times, or we should throw it out, or we should not espouse those values, I think that's very dangerous thinking as well. So I think it's all about accountability and the ability to witness history from understanding what happened, and to go back to all of those things that we discussed earlier in terms of being independent and evaluating things and being open-minded to realize that maybe I don't know everything and maybe I need to learn some of these things.
Thank you, Chris. Sue, are you eager to answer this one, or can I toss you the other audience question?
I actually have an answer to both questions.
Okay,
So
let's
first,
start with this
yeah,
one, and then I'll say
I
the
again,
don't
other
know
one.
how Sue knows what the other question is. I guess
yeah.
I should be looking at the chat.
Uh,
So.
Again, like what Chris has said, that really resonates with me. So here's the thing. Number one, every organization, every group has their interest and priority and mission. Do your job. I'm going to do my job. You're going to fight for what you believe in. I'm going to fight for what I believe in. I think that's just the beauty of our society. And then, throughout the history, there's up and downs, political up and downs on a daily basis. And then like 200, like history wise, sometimes we had challenges, we are having challenges. I don't think that there is no like ultimate final destination for democratic progress. Actually, we should fight on that every single day, even though it's still 2026. But also, one perspective I want to add that is growing up familiar with Asian history, Korea, China, Vietnam, Burma, Cambodia's experience with authoritarian rule or dictatorship. I mean, I've seen how people risk their lives for democracy, freedom, and human rights, and then those values, like sort of in alignment with what Chris said, the United States of America is still a model country for others because we highly value the democracy and freedom and human rights, and then we have been fighting to preserve. And then as a conservative, I think that's what we need to conserve. So I still have so much hope that we this country has so much story to tell, lessons to share with the world about what democracy is and how we've achieved it with our own history uniqueness and how much we are ready to support others at home and abroad. So let's not forget about it. And then that's why I became an ABC. It is called ABC, American by Choice. To the first question. Second question,
So, Sue, I'm going to ask a
yeah,
question first so everybody
yeah,
knows.
please go ahead.
Question was, thank you for this panel. Generally speaking, I have found it difficult to communicate my humanities-based skills in resumes and cover letters because those skills are seen as soft, like having empathy, understanding power. But those documents are geared towards hard skills, project management, the ability to use certain softwares or digital platforms, cutting expenditures. At a general level or specific to your industry, how do you recommend advocating for yourself as a job candidate when you have a humanities background? And we have about 4 minutes left, so I'm going to start with Sue. And if we have a chance, Chris or Chanel, let me know if you want to add.
I'll be very quick. I received the same question so many times, and I'm telling you one thing. I use AI every day, but I am not an AI analyst or developer. What I heard from my leadership is that, hey, so we are looking for someone who can use AI efficiently, not an AI developer. We need somebody who asks the right questions, the creative questions to AI. Not with like a technical background about like how to develop AI programs. And AI is actually helping us to develop programs. So probably we don't need to even learning coding anymore. I mean, while I still respect developers' work, I really appreciate that. So the point is, I actually my short answer is you don't need to worry about it. But like going back to the point of storytelling, think about that aspect of and cover letter in particular. You're not gonna list what's already written in your resume. You're gonna share your story, so you should be able to weave different things together into like impactful introduction of yourself. Happy to discuss about it further offline, but I'll stop here.
Thanks, Sue. Chris or Chanel, you have anything to add?
I mean, because I work so much in the humanities that um those skill sets as far as being, especially in leadership, being a courageous leader, empathetic, being able to build and hold up teams, is so I see that a lot. And not to say I'm looking for a job because I love my job, child, but I see that a lot in job descriptions, and also that's what I'm looking for when I'm hiring folks is there's you know their skill set being very people-centered, because this is such a people-centered agency. So but Sue, that was a great response.
I'll try to chime in very quickly because I think it's all been said, and I know you need to wrap up. I think that is a challenge. I've got a history degree, and I need to convey sort of my ability to process information. I think from the AI perspective, where we are at the moment, used to be everybody wanted to be a coder, and I feel for people that went to school to do that, and now AI has sort of wiped that out. I think it's still extremely important, and this may change, but fact checking AI and understanding that AI is still very much hallucinating. And that takes a humanities background to understand. And it did it to me the other day on a particular piece of information. I use it as a force multiplier, but I also check my own work and I check the work from what chat comes up with. So I still think that those skills, it's the platform that we're talking about, not necessarily the particular product. So I think that's important to be able to differentiate that you have a way of thinking in the humanities, that you are trained to process information in this way that's so far AI has not been able to replicate. AI is a predictor of what comes next. It doesn't substitute, and we're not at AGI yet. And at the point when we are, well, then that'll all change. But we're not there yet.
Thank you, Chris. And I'll just add, I put something in the chat about someone who does related work for museum professionals, but I was just chatting anecdotally with a friend who is in, I don't know, IT, something that I don't understand, that's outside my understanding. And he told me that the best employees he has are the people who are with humanities backgrounds because of the skill sets of analysis, creating an argument. Right, right. As somebody who entered undergraduate getting a degree in history but knew they didn't want to be a teacher, I feel the pain of this question deeply. I deeply understand it. So I hope we've answered all of the questions that were posed to us, and hope you all have enjoyed being with us for the first Bringing the Humanities to Life webinar. I want to remind you, if you saw the link in the chat, go back, sign up for our e-news so you don't miss the next one. And I really want to thank my panelists, Chair Johnson, Chair-elect Koo, which we didn't say earlier, and Chris Shank, who's new to the board, but as you can see, he's hit the ground running, and I've asked about a million things of him in his first few months. So I'm so grateful for all three of you joining us, taking time out of your day to lead this conversation. And I hope to see the people who I can't see, but see the participants in the next webinar, which will be in March and on hospitality, if I'm remembering correctly. So thank you all. Have a good afternoon, and I'll see you around.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.